Hello, everybody. Welcome to I Want to Teach English. It's a channel that's dedicated to teaching English, especially to newcomers, level 1, level 2 students. And really, I want to kind of delve a little bit into some of the reasons why using phonics is so crucial and important when you're working with English learners. I want to introduce myself. My name is Jose Torres. I've been teaching English especially to newcomers for well over 2 decades. And during that time, I spent quite a bit of time doing research and trying different methods, working with newcomers to try to develop a practical and efficient way to teach English. And I realized early on that phonics is a key, a major key in teaching English. And so that's why I wrote I Want to Learn English. And so this kind of a play on I want to learn English, I want to teach English, and this is really dedicated and is meant for teachers. Anybody who's working with English learners could benefit from this. So let's talk a little bit about phonics, okay? And I think people have different ideas about what phonics is. And phonics is more than just teaching the letters of the alphabet and just the sound letter associations. That's, of course, is the very basic level of the whole foundation building, if you will. But it goes deeper than that. It goes way deeper than that. It's, you really have to, especially with newcomers, you have to spend a bit of time talking about vowels. So let's talk a little bit about vowels, okay? Because vowels, I'm not saying anything you don't already know, but vowels, you got to have vowels. You have to establish vowels because you can't have a syllable without a vowel. You can't have words without syllables. You can't have a string of sentences without words, right? So that is why you need to establish vowels right away. And the differentiating between the long and the short vowels is more complicated than you think, because there is an auditory element that you have to apply when teaching vowels clearly. And for English learners, even those that are in the intermediate levels and up, sometimes have a difficult time hearing those differences between, A and in between, E and etc. And so that's why I spent a little bit of time focusing on that, especially in the first unit of the book. And that's a no-brainer as to why I'm doing that. And teachers who established that early on, and there's a lot of data that I've collected over the years, and I was able to have that read and peer-reviewed and whatnot, and everyone was in agreement that when you establish that early and when students master that, or at least get a real good grip of that in the early stages of the acquisition process, clearly that shows greater gains in the long run in terms of whatever assessment tools you use. You're really able to see that difference in time as they're progressing. And the ones that aren't quite able to establish a real good foothold on the distinguishing between long and short vowels, the data suggests that they will take them a bit longer to acquire, the foundational piece before they can advance in the acquisition process. That's what the data shows. It's what I've clearly have observed and seen myself over the years. And there's plenty of data and a lot of research out there to support that. So let's talk a little bit more about that now, and specifically talking about the vowels, okay? All right, so in the book, I have a series of assessment tools. Each one gradually becoming a little bit more difficult so that you can really gauge as the teacher to see where your students are in terms of grasping the difference between hearing these two differences. And that's something you have to apply. Now, you could use, if you purchase this book and you use the vowel assessments that are in the book, they're already played out for you. They're already explained in the teacher's manual. I go at great length discussing that. But if you design your own, you can design your own, and that's fine. Just know that you have to have a system, and it has to be consistent so that when you're tracking these with your students, that it's that they're the same assessments. You don't kind of change it up on them, and that you're actually going through these exercises to get them familiar with that, with frequency words and that sort of thing. So if you look and if you look here. So here's the assessment tool that I use that I employ in the book, and I basically spend a lot of time talking about and about the vowels and going over reading the words and showing them on the board or on a projector, and pointing them out. And a lot of times we discuss what they mean in their native language. It could be whatever language they speak. There's always a word or something similar that they have in their own language, and that's good because that builds that connection in terms of meaning. So it's more than just a series of sounds, that there actually has some kind of background knowledge that they can connect to it. So in the tool that I have here, I just basically go over practicing those words, not just pronouncing them, but then I pronounce them and then I put on the board, okay, does that have a long vowel or does that have a short vowel? And then we kind of do that as a group activity. And as a second group activity, I go through another series of words. Again, I lay out the words that have all long A sounds, all long E sounds, long I sounds, etc., and then go through the short vowels and words that have those, and just go one by one. And this is a very lengthy process. It could take a good chunk of your class time, depending on how much time you use. But there's a lot of things happening here. It's not just the sounds that the students are getting and connecting, but it's also meanings to these words. And these are words that are not like Mickey Mouse words. These are words that they're going to use in their language, because this is meant for older students. It's meant for adolescent, high school students, adults especially. If you have a word like, plane and pain, train, these are all words that they are using as they go through about in their city life or whatnot. And so it's important that if you're going to do your own, to use words that are going to be of use to them, not just the words that are easy, that have these specific sounds, like bat or mat. Those words are great, but I mean, how can they put that into their vernacular of use right now? And so I try to make this as efficient as possible, so that some of these words are words that they can connect to from their current language, their first language, and also words that they're going to be able to incorporate into their everyday conversation, which is the goal. Once we've established that, we do a pre-assessment, is what I like to call it, where you go over a set of words and you try not to. I don't trick my students with this one. It's a matter of like all the words on the top are long vowels words. All the words on the second row are all short vowel words. And so once we do go one by one, I try to do the long and then the short, the long and then the short, and hopefully they will hear the difference and not catch the pattern. But if they catch the pattern, they catch the pattern. That's fine. We always have a good laugh about it afterwards. And really, once you've established, hey, I wasn't trying to trick you. All these words on the top are long. All these words on the second row are short. And then they kind of get a chuckle out of that. But more importantly, there's only 10 of these words in this pre-assessment. And this gives you just a little hint in assessing where they are in terms of understanding and hearing those differences. So like if they get 6 out of 10, then that's a 60%. That would be, if you were to put that into a grade, that would be like a D grade. So if there's a 7, it's a 7, it's a C and on. And so when you get to the first assessment, the vowel assessment, these are the ones that are where you really start tracking where they are, because these are the indicators that are going to show you where these students are, what trajectory they're on. It's a good predictor once you average out the grade, the scores for the 3 assessments. There's 3 main assessments for vowels. The first one is really straightforward. It's just listen to the words. You repeat them. I repeat them 3-4 times slowly. And then I, have them write it in the box where it's long vowel, or if they hear a short vowel in the word, that they write it in the box for the short vowel. And we do that. I, go over the scoring of it, and I'll give it back to them and say, to see how they did. And sometimes, if it's a low score, they're like a little disappointed. I said, don't look at this as, a failure. Look at this as here's where you have, here's the room we have to improve on. This is not meant to discourage you. It's meant to encourage you to practice more. So you just give them those resources, like the ones that are in this book, where they just practice and they listen and they practice and they listen. So at the next time they're more motivated to do better. And the ones that are scoring right around the middle or higher, like if they're doing anywhere from 60% on up, that's usually a pretty good indicator of how the students are going to do in the long run. So essentially the phonics component here, the vowels assessment component of this, is really a matter of, it's not your entire lesson. Okay, it's not your entire work. This is just a part of it, but you have to emphasize and dedicate some time to it so that you understand early on. This is in the initial phases of your class, to establish where they are and give you a real clear window where they are. So the first assessment is going to give you some indication right away. Now, I would break it up, maybe do one on Monday, then do another one on Thursday or whatever, give them time to actually practice it and try it out. I wouldn't do more than 2 in a week. I would try to do one, depending on how long your course is. One in every couple of days or something like that. The second vowel assessment starts like the first one, where you hear the words and you put them in either the long vowel box or the short vowel box. But then you have a second part, and the second part is where you give them 3 words, right? Like I'm gonna give you the example that's here in this vowel assessment 2. Like number 1 is read, find, and reel, and the directions say listen and circle the words with the short vowel sound. So 2 of the words are going to have long vowels. One of them is going to have a short vowel, and that's the one you want them to hear the difference of. Reason being because short vowels are more difficult for students. That's just my professional opinion and working with them for so long, that you want to have them right, because that's the one that they have the hardest time with. So that's the one you want to spend more time on in terms of them hearing those differences. So that's why I spent a little bit, because this is going to tell you if they're able to hear those differences. You give them 3 words, 2 have long vowels, 1 has short vowel. They have to distinguish the one with the short vowel and circle it. So that's the second part here. You average out that. Again, if they score 60% or better, that's a good cue that, okay, this student is on the right trajectory. And the higher the score, the more likely they are to do well in your course, in your class. The third one is a little bit more, there's more to it. It starts off with a conversation. So this one you use a rubric that it's in the book. It's in the right around the scope of sequence. And here we talk the students, you model this conversation for them. Okay. We're not trying to force them into a situation where they're awkwardly reading something they've never done before. That's not what we're trying to do here. What you want to do is you want to model this conversation. You say it first, have them repeat it, right? Then do it a second time if necessary. Have them say the conversation rather, and then repeat it, okay? You score them when you have them pair up, okay? This is the part where they have to work with a partner, and if they don't have a partner, then you be the partner, and you have this conversation where they're reading student A, you're reading student B. Then when you do that, you switch. Then you're student A and they're student B, etc. So that's how it works, where you hear the conversation twice. One where they're doing the first student, one when they're doing the second student, and you're listening for that differentiating between the vowels. That's what you're listening for. A, comprehension, sure, but you also being able to say the pronounce the words correctly and to say the sentences correctly. But what you're really listening for, aside from all that, is are they able to say the words with those vowels in them correctly? Are they saying there, or are they saying there, or are they saying mechanic shop, or are they saying it mechanic shop? I mean, how are they saying it? When they have those little nuances in the vowels that are a little off, then you score them accordingly. And it's a score from 1 to 10. So if they sound pretty good, you're going to score them anywhere between 7 and 8 or 9, or depending on how well they pronounce that. If they're not pronouncing those words correctly, but everything else sounds pretty good, that's your discretion. But use the rubric; it kind of gives you a little bit of better guide in terms of scoring. But that's really you as the teacher, and try not to be so like, oh, they're trying real hard and you give them a better score, because that's gonna deviate the data, and it's not going to give you a really accurate picture of where your students are. So be honest in your grading and how you're scoring your students for that first part. The second part is just like the other ones, where they're hearing for the difference between a long vowel and a short vowel. But the only difference is they're going to add the phonetic line, or the little u. The line indicates that it is a long vowel, and the little u indicates that it's a short vowel. So you establish this before you give them this assessment. I do this usually a couple of days before I give them the assessment, where I write a word on there. Let's look at this word, the word hot. Is that a long vowel or a short vowel? Usually they're really quick about, oh, that's a short vowel. Okay, well, if it's a short vowel, the way we want to visually indicate that it's a short vowel, we put a little U on top, okay? And so that's something you establish before you give this assessment, just so that they can give a written indication that they are able to distinguish between the two sounds. And then the third part is just like in the other assessment where they're listening to 3 words being read, and one of them is the short vowel. They circle that. So here's this one, where the other ones were 20 point, where the max. Here your max is 25 point because you have to factor in the short conversation piece at the time. So this third assessment is a little bit longer. There's a lot more there to unpack and a lot more there to prepare them for, because by this time they shouldn't be taking these assessments back to back to back. They really shouldn't. They should be going, once you've established some conversation practices. So really this third assessment should be a little bit later than the other two. Maybe another week or so later, after you start doing some conversation practices or, other activities where they're conversating or having some kind of pronunciation activities, so that they're able to be more comfortable, especially if they're doing pair work where they're simulating conversations. Anyway, so at the end of it, right, you collect all these 3, right? Hopefully you're writing this down before you give it back to them. Make sure you write the scores down for each student. And there's a template that you can download if you wish to track them on your own. That'll be on the website, iwtle.com. You could also email me, I want to learn English 3@gmail.com. If you want to communicate with me directly, I can send you these templates. You can communicate with me directly. And, if you'd like to share that data with me as well, because I'm always collecting data from people who use this across the country and other parts of the world, because the more data, the better. You're more than welcome to do so. But these are all available. There's also a paper version of this, a hard copy of this in the textbook. In the teacher's manual, excuse me. Once you take those 3, you average out those scores. Let's say a student scored 60 on the first one. Maybe she dipped down to a 50 on the second one, but the third one, man, she nailed it. She had an 85, let's say. Okay, so you average out those scores. So this student is going to be well over 60%. I can feel very confident that this student by the end of the session is going to do well on her exit exam or whatever the assessment is at the end. It shows where the student began and where the student ended. If the student is scoring below 60%, it's rare for them to show those gains. It does happen, but I found that over time, with all the students and all the data that I've collected over the years and all the things I've looked at, not just from my classes, but from other teachers that have shared with me, if they're scoring less than 60%, they're going to need a lot of remedial work. They're going to need a lot of one-on-one. They're going to need some intervention, because it's going to be hard for them to show the significant gains to get them to exit out and move on to the next level. That's just what the data suggests. So that's why I say it's so important to really establish and to work vowels and just work with vowels and sound letters with the level 1s, the beginners, the newcomers. It is so important. And if you are able to assess them and use this assessment or some other assessment, that's what's going to indicate to you a real trajectory, a real data-supported, evidence-based assessment trajectory of where the student will be. And this also will help you tailor your lessons going forward, because if more than half of your class are scoring less than 60 on these assessments, you need to spend a little bit more time teaching those letters and teaching those one-syllable words, getting them to establish the difference between long and short vowels. It's so critical. It's so important. I can't stress that enough. I'm telling you, over 2 decades I've been working with newcomers. There is nothing that I will die on that hill. I will, because it's so critical for English learners to establish at the very, very early on. If they keep moving on, this is something that's going to hinder them down the road. It's going to become a problem for them later on. They're not going to be able to get a strong foot holding on the language going. They might be able to write it, they might be able to read it, but they're going to struggle with the hearing, understanding, and speaking of it. So this the first part, and this is why I spend Unit 1 just dedicated to the vowels, because it is so critical. I mean, everything else builds on top of that. Anyway, I hope this was somewhat informative, and hopefully you'll go back to your class and try to establish this. There's no there's no law that says or rule that says you can't bring this no matter what point you are in your session, just so long as you do it, because phonics is an ongoing thing in English learning classes. Whether you started at the beginning or you started in the middle, it doesn't matter, because throughout the units, throughout the session, you always need to come back and tie this in. You always have to come back and review it. And even in this book, I come back in unit 3 and I review the vowels again. You know, we go to digraphs, we go to consonant blends, and we finish off this book with diphthongs. And diphthongs is really just like the next level of vowels. So it's something that's so important, and I just can't stress this enough. Spend some time with your students, and especially those newcomers. Get them to master the vowels, the long and the short vowels. Just these, because there are more complex ones. You know, later on as the unit goes on, as the book progresses, so do the complexities of these phonics components. Anyways, I hope that was of use to you, and hopefully, feel free to drop any comments in the comments section. You can DM me, or you could just email me directly at iwanttolearnenglish3@gmail.com. I look forward to any and all feedback, and I thank you for your time. Until next time, God bless.